Well, we've already started with who are experts according to your opinion, but today we have a pleasure to peek a little bit into the new book that our colleagues from CAP, Siara, Roland, and Cecile and Ingrid have been working on facilitating experiential learning in higher education. We will be talking about developing expertise today, and Siara and Roland will take us through this journey for the next hour and so. So I just leave the floor to you, Siara and Roland. Thank you for being here.
Great. So thank you for these ideas. I'm just going to clear off the screen in order to be able to advance to the next screen smoothly. So, Roland, do you want to do an introduction here?
Sure. Okay. Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you today and share this. This is the first time we've shared this particular aspect of the book, which is about the idea of the focus on expertise. And maybe just to kind of articulate a little bit about why that's an important part of what we did here. Very often when people think about improving teaching in higher education, the focus is very often on the use of the surface versus deep metaphor. So surface learning versus deep learning as a way of thinking about higher education. I guess one of the things that became apparent to us is that metaphor has a lot of limitations. And in particular, it has limitations when thinking about the kinds of work that people do in practical settings, and in particular, the kinds of things engineers do. And so we looked for another organizing framework to think about, how do we look at improving higher education practice? And the one we came to was the idea of expertise. So what we'll do today is talk to you a little bit about this expertise framework, and then look at how it applies to higher education practical teaching, and how that can help us maybe look at how we improve higher education practical teaching. Do you want to go to the next slide, Siara? And so, okay, so here's our goals for the session. First of all, we'll talk a little bit about what is meant by expertise. I see from the comments you've written, many of you already have a sort of pretty clear idea in terms of expertise and what's, what in particular, and in terms of the second goal, are the difference in expert performance and novice performance. I see someone already flagged that in the comments. Then the opportunity will be to look at how to apply that to your own discipline. And we'll also look at how it is people learn to become experts and what that means for teaching and learning in the discipline. Siara, I haven't introduced us there. Do we need to introduce ourselves, or does everyone know who we are? I think everyone knows who we are, right? So is that just me being rude and big-headed, or do we need to introduce ourselves? Someone tell me.
A word or two.
A word or two. Okay. So I'm Roland. I work in the Teaching Support Center along with Siara and Ingrid, and I will say Cecile also, even though Cecile currently works with the CD with Patrick.
Yes.
Siara, do you want to say anything there?
No, I think that maybe just the one other thing to give in terms of the context of this book is that that sort of the development work and the ideas in this book is something that we've been digesting for quite a long time through our work and discussions with people from across EPFL, and that's been really useful for us in terms of refining the ideas into things that are practical and useful for teachers, and really thinking about what it actually means to teach effectively. And so as Roland's highlighted for you, we're going to focus on the idea of thinking about, of using expertise as the lens to think about what it really is that we want students to develop. And that the later chapters in the book that we won't cover today are about the practical how-to part of that, with additional exercises that you'll have an opportunity to discover at another time.
Okay, cool. So let's start with the first of those goals, which is around expertise. I start here with two different definitions that I've sort of pulled out of out of dictionaries. So you know, Webster defines it as one who is very skillful and well informed in a particular discipline. So the focus there is on skill and knowledge. And then the Wikipedia definition is someone who is widely recognized and whose judgment is accorded authority and status by their public or their peers. And so the reason I put these two definitions here is that these two definitions, in a sense, capture two different dimensions of expertise. There is the knowledge and the skill, but there is also the fact that that knowledge and skill domain is recognized as a domain by other people, and that the person is identified as having skill in that area by their peers or by the wider community. And those two dimensions, I guess, are really important in terms of looking at the research on expertise and expert performance as it's developed over the last, I'm going to say, 40 years. The early studies on expertise really date back to the late 60s and early 70s, but really the 80s and 90s would have been the kind of high point of expertise research. And the early studies were very much on chess. You know, what made chess masters better than novices. And the point of that was that you know, that fitted the first definition here. Chess, it's easy to identify who's more skillful than someone else, because the person who's more skillful is the person who wins. That then becomes hard to do when you move into other domains, where it's less about beating someone else. And so when you look at expertise in domains like programming or nursing or surgery or teaching or engineering design, all of which have been, you know, studied substantially, the idea of recognition of the expertise becomes kind of more important, simply because it's not so easy to say, yes, this person is objectively better than someone else. We don't have surgery competitions where we have surgeons playing off against each other to see, you know, how many 6 months later post-surgical successes they have. So if I just move on to the next slide there, I guess the key bit which comes out of this, or the bit that really would pull out of these two different ways of looking at expertise, is the idea that expertise can be understood as being superior reproducible performance on representative tasks. And we've emphasized this idea of representative tasks here, because that's maybe a useful way of thinking about what makes your discipline. What makes a sociologist a sociologist? What is it that sociologists can do that other people don't do? What is it that engineers can do that other people don't do? So what are the representative tasks of the discipline? And so this idea of representative tasks is one we'll return to a little bit later on, but I just want to flag for you that question at this point. You know, when you're thinking about your discipline, what are its representative tasks? What are the things that the expert in your discipline should be able to do that other people in other disciplines maybe wouldn't do? Okay, that's Siara. Do you want to take over at this point?
Great. So I want to go through four of the key characteristics around how experts are different from novices in the way that they're actually going about thinking and actually engaging with these tasks. So at the big level, we can see that this is an expert chess player. We can see as we walk by a classroom that this instructor really has their students really engaged and participating. But what is it in the way that they go about their representative tasks that is common across experts from different disciplines? And one really important point in that is actually what experts see, and that experts see things that novices do not see in the space. So an interesting, very literal example here from Aaron Cosbelt is a study that was conducted with students in art and design and other students in the institution, where they were given a series of images that were out of focus pictures or line drawings that were missing key lines. And the art and design students were much more able to identify what that image was than students from other areas. And so that in the skill set of the experienced ability to draw of art and design students, it isn't just the mechanical ability to produce the drawings, but literally what they see in looking at images. And that this has also been identified in a number of other disciplines. For instance, novice teachers tend to see and to focus on the actual behavior in the classroom of these students are disruptive, these students are less disruptive or being constructive. But expert teachers see the patterns that precede that. They see the context and the situations that are leading to productive or unproductive behaviors, and are therefore better able to either respond or to intervene or to build successful activities that create the context that they're looking for. And so really experts see different patterns. Then when experts are recalling their knowledge, they recall it quickly, and what really enables them to recall it quickly is the way that they have encoded that information. It's not just that they know the things, but rather than knowing a bunch of things, those things get grouped together in a basket that allows them to recall all those ideas together. So rather than there being as many different ideas, a larger set of ideas gets recalled together. And so that, for instance, all of the equations and concepts around kinematics come together rather than coming as 6 or 7 different things when the experts are working on problem solving and on those tasks. The other aspect is about them identifying which information to recall. So they're cued much more in a much more contextual way. We say that their knowledge is conditionalized to identify what knowledge is relevant in this context. And so rather than trolling through the vast amount of information in their brain, they're more able to access what is relevant in this moment, and that information is queued up effectively. So far, the parts I've been reviewing here have been very, very cognitive about really what's happening just solely inside experts' brains and in a very logical and processing approach. And that is the way that expertise has been, many studies on expertise have taken this approach to it. However, there are really important additional aspects to expertise that have to do with feeling and with more social aspects. So focusing on feeling for a moment, the ability to manage your own feelings and to manage your own, the example here from Andrew Wiles in terms of frustration or motivation, for whether or not you actually whether or not you get to writing, whether or not you get yourself out of a stuck and frustrated place in writing or not. So that managing your own emotions and the skills and strategies that you have to keep on working at it when it's difficult. There's also in many professions and for many experts, there's also an aspect in terms of managing other people's emotions or managing emotion in relationship. So, for physiotherapists or nurses or managers, how do you respond to and manage and connect with other people that are essential for a task to be successful? And there's interesting work in this area around engineers particularly has identified that when engineers are more connected with the feelings that come from the responsibility and the potential implications of their design ideas, that they in fact make better design ideas that are more coherent for society. So although we don't tend to think of feeling as a core engineering part of a core set of skills for an engineer, it is in fact an important part of that expertise. So I've done a really brief overview of 4 of these key aspects of how experts are different from novices. There are 3 other ones that we address in the chapter, and we'll come back to this last one at the end of this presentation.
Siara mentioned earlier on that there were sort of 3 areas from the expertise research that we didn't talk about a lot beforehand, and I just wanted to come back to one of those, which is this idea of experts monitoring themselves better than novices. So, I mean, research with experts show that experts judge the difficulty of problems better than novices do. When you give novices and experts potential solutions, experts are better at judging which ones will and won't work. And when they're solving things, experts check their work more often as they go than do novices. And that's kind of maybe a surprising thing, People often think that experts just get it right the first time. The reason they get it right is that they're doing more checking as they're going. And so this all really highlights this importance of metacognition. It highlights that part of what experts do is they monitor and control their thinking in their domain. And one way in which we can help students monitor and control their thinking in their domain is being clearer with them about what is our goals, why it is that we're doing what we're doing. So I guess this is just maybe a reflection point to bounce back to you. When you design activities, do you design them and tell students to do them, or do you explain to students why you've designed them the way you've designed them? Do students understand the why behind the design of the activity which is there? If they do understand the why, and if they understand what are the goals of the activity, and if they understand why it's structured the way it is, they're better able to monitor their own activity in it. And that's a useful skill for them in terms of developing expertise. It also improves their learning, right? So, I make reference here to the Hattie and O'Donoghue meta-analysis. Essentially, so if students understand what the success criteria are, the impact of that on their attainment is an increase of about 1 standard deviation in their assessed learning. So that's a really strong impact by being clear about success criteria. Okay, and on the spirit of being clear about success criteria, Siara, this is what we wanted you to get from this workshop. We wanted you to have an idea in terms of what was meant by expertise. We wanted you to be able to identify some of the key features in terms of the difference between expert and novice performance. And we wanted you to be able to apply these insights and insights about how people become expertise to your own discipline. I really hope that we have achieved at least some of those goals, and I hope you found this useful. I'll stop there and hand back to Siara in case there's anything you want.
Well, if people don't feel like they've completely got it yet, they can read the book. And so EPFL Library has very generously already purchased both paper copies and a digital access for the book. So being logged on to the VPN, you can access the book immediately. What we've been focusing on with you today is chapter 2 is about how students develop disciplinary expertise. And so thinking about expertise. In chapter 3, that's looking at it really in practical settings. So when students are active and doing things in labs or studios, what is it that they're doing and working on? Part 2 is really practical in terms of what do you actually do when you're there beside students in the lab or in the field in order to help them really make the most of that activity, not just designing the activity, but how do you then accompany the activity in a way that's effective for their learning? And then part 3 is the deep base in terms of where these ideas are coming from. And
I formally thank everyone for their company today and for sharing their lunchtime with us. I learned a lot, and thank you, Roland and Siara, for this fantastic Lunch and Learn session.